Some surprising new evidence has come to light about the existence of Jesus. And here's the most exciting part. We might finally have a real image of what Jesus looked like. Recent scientific experiments on the Shroud of Turin have revealed some fascinating details that could change everything we thought we knew. But before diving into the intriguing discoveries, take a moment to subscribe, so we can reach our goal of 1 million subscribers in the next 6 months. Now, let's get back to the story. What's the new evidence surrounding the Shroud of Turin all about? To understand its importance, we need to go back to the history of the shroud itself. It gets its name from being kept in the Turin Chapel in Italy, where it has been preserved for generations. The earliest known records date back to the 1300s when a knight owned it. The shroud survived a fire and some unsuccessful repair attempts before being placed in Turin in the 17th century. So, why has this ordinary-looking cloth been so carefully protected over the years? It's believed to be the burial cloth used to wrap Jesus Christ's body, the central figure of the Christian faith. What makes the shroud truly remarkable is the faint image of a man's face imprinted on it. Records mention this cloth with a faint figure since the 1300s. Over time, the shroud and the image seemed to be forgotten, but in 1898, a photographer named Secondo Pia took pictures of it. When he developed the negatives, he made an amazing discovery. A clear image of a man with his arms crossed and eyes closed appeared. This image closely resembled traditional portraits of Christ, matching the face found on the shroud. The next question you might ask is whether the shroud is mentioned in the Bible or other ancient texts. The Bible doesn't specifically mention a shroud like this, but it does say that Jesus was buried in a cloth provided by Nicodemus the Pharisee and Joseph of Arimathea. This cloth could possibly be the same one. It makes sense since Nicodemus and Joseph were both part of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling council, and they were wealthy. The cloth would have changed hands over time and eventually ended up with a French knight named Geoffrey de Charny. After his death, it was passed to the House of Savoy, where it stayed until it was given to the Catholic Church for better care, recognizing its possible historical significance. One of the first major efforts to prove the Shroud of Turin was a fake happened in the 1970s. When some top scientists formed the Shroud of Turin Research Project, STURP. There were claims that the image of a man on the shroud had been painted as a hoax. Out of curiosity, the STURP team used imaging technology to study the cloth. To their surprise, they found that the 14-foot-long cloth had a real imprint of a human, not a painting. The team did more tests, and in their final report, they stated that the image was of a real person who had been crucified, but they couldn't explain how the image got there. After the STURP team's research was done, several carbon dating methods were used to challenge the shroud's authenticity. The shroud was tested by 3 labs around the world, in Arizona, Switzerland, and Oxford. Each lab found that the shroud was much newer than people believed, but things got strange after that. The data from these labs was never made public. Instead, the information came from other sources. It wasn't until a lawyer insisted that the public should see the data that it became clear the results were not convincing. The radiocarbon dating didn't account for the image on the cloth, and there was still no explanation for how it got there. The STURP team had already determined that the image couldn't have been made by an amateur painter or forger. It seemed to be a real imprint of a man. Some experts suggested that creating such a clear image on the cloth would have required a huge amount of energy, about 6.4 gigawatts, which is an incredibly high amount. The research results have been inconclusive so far, leading to new tests using advanced X-ray imaging technology. What scientists discovered surprised the world. 5 Italian scientists worked together to finally settle the question of the shroud's authenticity. While proving how the image appeared is impossible, they aimed to determine the cloth's age and confirm whether it really is 2,000 years old. To do this, they studied the breakdown of the linen fibers over time. Using a new technique called wide-angle X-ray scattering, scientists checked if the date given by the machine matched the supposed time period of the cloth. They saw this as a great chance to confirm the results from the radiocarbon dating tests done since 1988. When deciding which part of the linen to test, they took a sample close to where the 1988 tests were conducted. The results were surprising. The analysis dated the cloth to between 55 and 500 AD, which supports its authenticity. The 5 scientists did something different compared to the team from 1988. Instead of relying on the half-life decay of carbon-14, they examined the natural aging of cellulose, which is a main component of linen from that time. According to the researchers, the way the cellulose aged suggests that the Shroud of Turin could be around 20 centuries old. Even more astonishing, they took this opportunity to investigate the imprint on the shroud. Remember how we mentioned earlier that the shroud had been exposed to fire? To test this, they heated the cloth sample to 200 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes to see how the heat would affect it. The scientists explained that any such imprint would disappear if the fabric was exposed to high temperatures, given how fragile it is. When the study was published, people worldwide were stunned by the possibility that the face on the shroud might actually be the face of Christ. This realization led many to think it was time to create a more accurate representation of Christ's face, especially with the technology now available. Artificial intelligence, evolving rapidly, made it possible to reconstruct the face from the shroud. When using an AI model like Midjourney, the face produced looked remarkably similar to traditional images of Christ. It showed a man with long hair and a beard, with severe wounds on his head and body, just like the injuries Christ would have endured during his crucifixion. Many others achieved similar results using this approach, sparking hope and interest across the world. Aside from the items used to bury Jesus, people believed the Shroud of Turin and took his place as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. However, regardless of whether the cloth is real, the Bible teaches us that it is not right to be like the Apostle Thomas, who only believed because he saw physical evidence. Christ has instructed us to believe in him, even if we do not see him. Our trust should be placed in God alone, not in any physical object that deteriorates and crumbles as Christians. We have to ask ourselves whether our faith is rooted in God's love or his existence, because while the latter can be shaken, the former cannot. God took on the form of man and came to this planet to save us, his beloved, from an eternity of pain, suffering, and separation from him. We should be thankful every day for their sacrifice on the cross at Calvary, and live in a manner that is pleasing to him. The Shroud of Turin is a beautiful ode to Christians around the globe that the God they serve is one who loved them enough to die for them and strong enough to pull them out of death and bring them to eternal life. In the words of preacher Billy Graham, God proved his love on the cross when Christ hung, bled, and died. It was God saying to the world, I love you. If you've made it all the way to this part of the video, you may qualify for our membership, so you might want to listen closely. It's an exclusive area where we release videos that we cannot show to the public. Yet you will get to see everything first and learn about truths that we cannot reveal anywhere else. If you enjoy our content and want to support us, click on the Super Thanks button below. Your Super Thanks is not just a donation, it is a blessing that supports our mission to share the transformative journey of Jesus. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on my future videos. Thanks for watching. Make sure to click the video on your screen.